Hey everyone, on today's episode of Huber Hype, bring your quarters. Speaking of quarters, talking about arcades today. Those were the glory days. Not talking about tokens, not talking about cards. We've talked about arcades here in the past on Huber Hype. You know, Mortal Kombat, Operation Wolf. But today, we're gonna have a huge focus on it. We're gonna talk about the 4 games that have had the biggest impact on my life that I still dream about to this day. Let's get started. First up, something really close to my heart, little game called Die Hard Arcade. Don't even get me started on the Die Hard film, one of the greatest cinematic masterpieces in action history, directed by John McTiernan. Number 1 and 3, canon only. That's it. The only machine of that I remember was at UCLA's student campus. So my dad went to UCLA, and we used to go to a lot of UCLA football games. And I can remember one weekend, we went to the campus, and I was really bored because, you know, all the grown-ups were like talking about football and doing their own little thing. So I can remember there was an arcade, the student arcade up on one of the floors in a random building on UCLA's campus, and I remember they had Die Hard Arcade there. So anytime a UCLA football game would come around and we would go, I would make it a point to go to the campus, to get upstairs and play that machine. Now this game, the president's daughter gets kidnapped, you're John McClane, and there's a progression throughout it. Your clothes start getting ripped just like in the movie. He mysteriously loses his shoes even though you never see it play out in the game. But this is just a standard beat 'em up in the vein of Streets of Rage and Fighting Force. You get guns, you can arrest people. Like if you have a handgun, there's an instant arrest move. You go up and you grab them, you hit them, boom, under arrest. But what I really love are the bosses, who are all varied. I mean, you'll see characters in this game that have entirely different movesets unique to that one character that no one else has in the game, to give everyone kind of their own individual personality. And all the weapons in the game are just really fun to use. And I also love that you had an inventory. You could pick up multiple items and store them in an inventory that it just connected you into the game more. It wasn't just a pump in your quarter, play, here it is, what's in front of you. It's like you had to gain items and there was no time limit. Go at your own speed. So it's really just combining two of my favorite things in my life, Die Hard and beat 'em ups. It was 2-player co-op, you could bash everyone's head in, and the graphics were so far ahead of anything that I could play at my own house. I mean, I was playing this pretty much at the same time as Streets of Rage, and while I do prefer Streets of Rage 1 and 2 and 3 more than Die Hard Arcade, the impact that this game had visually and spiritually will be forever remembered. Next up, to shift gears, we're gonna talk about, Bossman is so mad. We're gonna talk about Initial D. Wow, okay, intensity, get intense. Initial D. You think that Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat cabinet are competitive? Why don't you take a look at that quad cabinet of Initial D? I mean, this game felt like an exclusive club. It was where the cool kids hung out. It was straight up Fast and the Furious race wars. You got your own squads. I can remember this legend, this character in that game. This guy at Palace Park, he was a renegade. He had no alliances, no allegiances, and no one would want to race him. He had a Skyline R33, and he would not back down to any challenge. He always wore all black. He had hair down to here with a spiked collar. Not a spiked, like a ball. He had the ball-bearing collar. And it was intimidating, because all those cool kids in that club had their own personal set of wheels. They had their car. The reason this game is so phenomenal is because when you boot it up, you have the option to create a card that now will store your vehicle and all of the modifications that you have made in the game on that card. So you pretty much have your car and your progression just on a little card that you would put in your wallet. You could take that thing anywhere, and anytime you saw a cabinet, you said, hey, I got my car, here we go. So just that community was so intense. Everyone would race against each other. The music is blaring, it's really intense. It was very arcade style, which I loved. It was all about drifting. Everyone that was so intense, they would always do that maneuver where they would spin the wheel really fast and it would just spin around and your back tires would kind of drift around. It would have a heavy emphasis on drifting. And I still have yet to encounter any other game in an arcade that was like it. It was a one-of-a-kind gem. They keep coming out with new iterations, and what I respect is that every single time a new version comes out, you can upgrade your card to that version, so you could still have your car from 10 years ago if you made it crazy. Next on the list, finally a game that is more accessible to us now, Metal Slug. So I'm sure a lot of you out there have played it, and if you haven't played Metal Slug, shame on you. Shame, honestly, if I'm speaking to you. If you have not played Metal Slug, I want you to go onto Steam right now, and I want you to play it. And then type in the comments below your thoughts. So Metal Slug, hell of a game. Just out of control, action-packed chaos, carnage, bloodshed. The pace of this game is everything. Frantic, fast. Again, co-op. Now, I can remember at my Lamppost Pizza, I had a Metal Slug cabinet. It was one of those, it's one of those cabinets that had like multiple games. It had Bust-A-Move on there. It had Metal Slug. Oh, beautiful cabinet. Miss those cabinets. So I can remember we would go to Lamppost Pizza during lunch hour at high school, which was like a daring thing to do. You had to get permission to go off campus to get a slice of pizza. So you can remember we would go there during lunch, and I would not eat. I would just play Metal Slug. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Not the not eating part, but I thought playing this game during lunch hour, something about playing like while you're still technically in school, just had this weird, awesome, like breaking the rules vibe. But back to the game at hand, Metal Slug, it just has a cartoony tone, but it is so graphic and serious, and it just constantly keeps ramping up throughout. The beginning, you start out in the jungle, a couple enemies coming at you at once. You're learning the pistol and the knife if they get close. And then you get the tank, and then just the levels start ramping. It always ends with some incredible boss. I remember the train boss and flying and planes. It just, everything gets so out of control that you can't help but keep wanting to know what's next. What happens next? I gotta get farther in this game. And let's not forget the power-ups. Those freaking power-ups, okay? Hearing that announcer just say, shotgun, chills. Love the shotgun. One of the best shotguns in games. Just an explosion of death, short range, but immediate kill. My favorite kind of weapon. And I think Metal Slug just spoke to me because of the pace. Just back to the pace, back to just being able to pop in a quarter and getting value, You could see how far you would get on one life or one continue, because it's one hit kill. It's like Contra, but just more beautiful, gorgeous. And the fact that they kept releasing sequels periodically. Every time you'd come to an arcade and you would see, what, Metal Slug 2? What, Metal Slug 3? I mean, it was like an expansion pack vibe almost, because it was back when news was a little harder to come by. So it would always be a pleasant surprise when a new Metal Slug would come. Lastly, Definitively. You know, people always give me a hard time with my hyperbole and, you know, best of all time, my favorite of all time, my number one of all time, you know. I'm a really all or nothing kind of guy. But I promise you, this is my favorite arcade game of all time, easily. Time Crisis 2. Let's back up the clock a bit. So you have Time Crisis 1, right? Changing the game. Okay, GunCon games, you know, you got your Virtua Cop, you got your Area 51, you've got your Lethal Enforcers, which we've talked about a lot on the history of Uber Hype. Time Crisis 1 comes out, and it changes things. It puts you in the game. You're in it. Just because of a simple pedal on the ground, that action pedal, okay? Now, for those of you who don't know what Time Crisis is, the original was a single-player game. It had this awesome castle vibe. You know, it was self-contained. The entire game was in this castle. And you would click this pedal to pop out from cover and shoot the enemies. And when you released it, you would go back into cover and you would be invincible to damage. But it being called Time Crisis, clock was always ticking down, so you just had to go and kill enemies as fast as you can, because if time ran out, game over. It was a hell of a game. But Time Crisis 2 comes out and just ramps everything up. It is the perfect arcade shooter, co-op, okay? Biggest change is that it's now 2 players, and the way that worked, I mean, that is... Modern console games should be taking a page out of Time Crisis 2. The way characters split up! I don't know how many times I've said I really want a co-op game, a survival horror co-op game, where 2 different players online go into completely different areas and they cut the mic. They're in different areas, sectioned off. Now, Time Crisis 2, being an old arcade game, doesn't go that far, but characters do split off, and that has an impact on the gameplay. Because when one character is pinned down in the corner, the other character on the complete opposite side of the map can pick off enemies to help his friend. It had this camaraderie like no other arcade game before it. There was a bond with your partner. And every time you shot that gun in the arcade, it had a kickback. A click, 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 click. Again, immersion. The pedal and that click. I mean, you could hear that click echoing throughout arcades like magic. So I always appreciate 1 being self-contained in that awesome castle setting, but 2 just has some gorgeous environments. I mean, in the beginning, you're in a European village street area. It's like Venice or Paris or something. Tables are getting knocked over. Cars are exploding in the street. They added like machine gun pickups, and I loved how they also rewarded loyal players to the first one because one of the main villains, Mad Dog, returned for revenge. So even the story kind of had an impact. You know, they were trying to have this satellite to destroy the world. And the bosses, they weren't just simple, you know, shoot the weak point. They had all these changing mechanics throughout. So the most memorable, I'll never forget him, he's on the train, and it's this giant guy. He picks up a missile and he slams it down on you. Then he'll turn around and slam it on your friend. He'll spin around. Then he like jumps into a helicopter and has this machine gun, Gatling gun. It's these tiered boss fights that have a huge payoff to each stage. So that again, definitively my number 1. I can remember beating the entire game without getting hit because I was so obsessed with this game. I played it for years. Every single time I see a Time Crisis 2 machine in an arcade, take all my money, everything. I will put every nickel, quarter, dime, dollar that I have on my person into that machine. And just some of those memories I have, I'll never forget. You know, you're in an arcade solo. Who knows where anyone is? You know, your parents are off on the go-karts or something. It's like, hey, I'm gonna go play Time Crisis. Random kid comes up. Old man comes up. Young lady comes up. And there's a connection. There's a bond right there. You are a team working together to take down Mad Dog. And you gotta learn to live together, or you're gonna die alone. So I did want to throw an honorable mention out there. You know, there is something about the vibe of an arcade. It's not all games. It's not all video games in there, you know? There's those ticket games. There's that skee ball. There's the one where you have to stop the spinning light on the number to get the maximum amount of tickets. There was something always really satisfying about, you know, sections. I spoke earlier about the Initial D Cool Club. It was like a high school or something. There were cliques. You had your skee ball professionals. You had your mom with her daughter that was trying to the quarter get it close to the edge machine. You had your hardcore fighters in the back corner. You had your brand new Time Crisis and Jurassic Park marquee games right up front. It was a collective consciousness. Arcades. They were from another time. And I friggin' miss them. I miss the vibe. I miss walking into one of those. I miss kids running around with Coca-Cola. I miss the guys outside playing miniature golf. Just going to an arcade was like Disneyland. It was just magical. And I will never take it for granted. So that's it for Huber Hype. Before I go, I did want to give a shout out to a couple other classic beat 'em ups. X-Men, Simpsons, and Alien vs. Predator. You know, Alien vs. Predator is a hell of a game, and it is distressing that has never been released on anything. The only way to play that game is in an arcade or an illegal ROM. The hell is that? So last week we talked about Mafia, which had a reveal the other day that I'm a little concerned about. You know, you give me that beautiful cutscene talking about Link and Clay, and you're capturing the tone, you're getting the music, you're getting the vibe. Then I saw some of that gameplay that just had me really questioning the direction of this franchise. But hey, we'll always have Mafia 1 and 2, so let's see what you had to say about them. Dreams and Fables, Huber, this episode just hit those strings in my heart. Mafia, Max Payne, I grew up with these games. Also, Godfather, Scarface, and Goodfellas are just the best of the best, hands down. Was really excited about the announcement of Mafia 3. 3 wishes for the game, driving model for Mafia 2. Yeah, that's my biggest concern, is the driving in this game just looks like Saints Row, but even more out of control. A compelling story in a unique, fully realized setting of 60s New Orleans. Tragic, multifaceted anti-hero. Also, what do you think of EA's Godfather games 1 and 2? I thought 1 was pretty good. Those are actually great, licensed, already existing property games, whatever you want to call them. Those games are underrated. They're actually very, very fun. It's very easy game to dismiss, but if you're looking for an open world Mafia game other than Mafia, definitely check out Godfather. Next up, Rabies 1. With Mafia 2, I always remembered the time change. This is my favorite comment, by the way. From the 40s, listening to Bing Crosby, Mr. Sandman, and then the jump to the 50s, Eddie Cochran and Buddy Holly. I loved that moment, coming out and seeing everything so different. One of the most memorable moments, just an unbelievable transition in a game. mind-blowing. Just truly mind-blowing. Everything felt real in that game, and that was definitely a big moment to further emphasize the realism and the importance of every single piece in that game. Lastly, Thor. The first Mafia game was so awesome. The mission where you go through the hotel and then end up at a funeral of a guy you killed, so good. And the way they are connected, mind-blowing. Yes, one of the best missions going into the hotel. There's a couple ways to do it, guns blazing or stealth. Classic. Coming up on GameTrailers.com this week, Tabletop Adventures finally makes a return after a long hiatus and a big cliffhanger. Man, that cliffhanger is probably worse than Toonami when Goku arrived during the Ginyu Force fight and they replayed the entire saga 15 times before continuing. So that's it for the episode. I am at Michael P. Huber. If you miss arcades as much as I do, let's talk it out. We can get through this together. As a matter of fact, ironically, hot off the presses news. Ben Moore, God bless his heart, comes to me yesterday because he knows I'm doing this episode. He knows I'm talking about Time Crisis, how much I love it. Comes up to my desk and he goes, Huber, I played Time Crisis 5 the other day, and it is amazing! He told me where it was. It's at some mall in LA somewhere. My mission this weekend is to track it down and go play it and report back, see how it is. But Ben Moore just hyping it up. This could be the return of Time Crisis. We'll see. Time for Huber's Q! I was gonna wait to do this Q, but I cannot wait any longer. The time is now. You have 3 weeks, 21 days to get caught up on Metal Gear Solid before the culmination and the finale of Hideo Kojima's legacy, The Phantom Pain. Go back and play every single Metal Gear Solid game. I don't care how you do it. I don't care how long you do it. I don't care if you have kids to feed. You need to do this. You need to get caught up before the Phantom Pain. This is a moment in time. 500 years from now, we're going to be looking back at the history books about Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear legacy, and this is the ending point.